Hello friends, today I'm going to show you how to do Intarsia on the knitting machine. Specifically, I have a Brother KX350 knitting machine, which is a mid-gauge flatbed knitting machine. A very similar knitting machine is the Silver Reed KH150. I always get the letters wrong, but they're both basic, mid-gauge flatbed knitting machines, which have pretty much no bells or whistles. So all of the stitch work and color work is done by hand, so it can be a bit tricky. So this tutorial is to show you how to do Intarsia on those knitting machines. So strap in, let's get started. So to get started, we're going to need 3 different balls in our gray color. I have 1 from my main skein, and then 2 that are just supplementary for the top of the heart, and then the other side. And then we have our pink, which I will need to divide into 2 when we get a little farther along. So you can go ahead and make this into 2 balls now if you'd like. I also have my chart in the back here, which I'll also show on the side of the screen so you can follow along with me as well. And we're going to move our carriage into position P. As a personal rule, whenever I'm working with more than 2 active strands of yarn, I always keep my carriage in position P just so that there's not too much to juggle. So here I've knit our 10 rows in the normal gray color, and we're going to start on our first row of color work. My in-work yarn is over on the right here. So that basically means we're going to start with this yarn, and then we're going to go to the pink, and then we're going to go to the larger of the other 2 gray balls. So first, we're going to push out these stitches that we want to work in gray. So that is okay. Double check that our carriage is on the P setting, and we'll go ahead and knit. There we go. And as you can see, it only knit up to this needle. Now we're going to take our pink color, and it's only 2 stitches, so instead of knitting with the machine, I'm going to knit by hand. So I'm going to push these 2 out. Oops, and I see here that I should have actually knit this in the gray. I did 1 less than I was supposed to, so I'm just going to knit that by hand real quick. Easy fix. And then I'm going to leave a bit of a tail, and I'm going to knit this by hand. Knit 1. And before we knit the next one, to give this stitch a little bit of security, I'm going to go ahead and push out this next stitch, which we're going to be knitting with the gray yarn. But I'm going to knit this, and I'm going to wrap that around, just like that. So now when we knit this gray stitch, it will kind of just catch this pink stitch underneath it and secure it in place. So now we can move these all out, and taking our gray ball, we will knit those. Okay, and here you can see this is kind of caught underneath there, just a little bit, and this is all secure. And now we move on to the next row. Now we're going to be working from left to right once more, so this stitch is already in work, so we're going to push these out. Okay, and we're going to knit that. Okay, and now we're going to move our carriage back over to the left, and we will push out the needles that we want to work with the pink color. Okay, and now we're going to take this, and we're going to wrap it like this. So that way, when we knit this next part again, it's going to catch and secure the stitch. Once again, this is not very many stitches, so I'm going to do this by hand. There we go. And now over here, we're going to kind of do the same thing. If you can't figure out where to put your yarn, if you're like, do I flip it over? Do I flip it under? Think about what will happen on the next row. So on the next row, we'll have this here, this will be on the back, and then we'll be knitting it this way. And this will be knitting this way. So if they were like this, they'd essentially not be touching. But if they're like this, they're gonna get caught on each other and kind of secure themselves in place. So we're gonna do it like this. There we go. Next row, we're gonna work from right to left again. There we go. And now we flip them once more, and we're gonna knit our pink. So now we're going to knit this section over here. Once again, we have another situation where we try to figure out which way we want it to go. Generally, I found kind of always works if it's over top. So sometimes I like knitting the first stitch by hand just so it has a good tension. Next row. Something else you can do is you can kind of do a double twist like that if you'd like. The only thing to watch out with that is it will 100% twist up your yarn down where you're keeping it, down here. So just keep an eye out on that make sure it doesn't get too twisted up on you. And something you'll notice is none of my in-work yarns are actually up here connected to my like tension dial or tension gauge at all. That's because there's just too many. This machine isn't designed really to be used with color work unless it's all hand manipulation like what we're doing. So it doesn't have, for me personally, it just gets tangled way too easily. It doesn't really have the capabilities of keeping your yarn untangled, especially if you're working with more than 2 active balls of yarn. So that's why I prefer to keep them on the ground. I also just kind of hate when my yarn gets all tangled up. I dealt with that a lot when I first started knitting. By hand is just constant tangling. I think I spent like hours and hours untangling yarn because I'm just not that organized sometimes. When it comes to my hobbies, I'm pretty organized with work, but the hobbies not so much. So I'd just throw all my yarn together and it would get super tangled. And I learned that it's just not worth it to do that. It's just better to be organized to start off with. So that's my personal preference. Okay, so here I noticed that I've made a mistake. So this side has 6 gray and this side has 7 gray, which they should be perfectly symmetrical, so it should be 6 and 6. So at some point, I didn't add another stitch where I was supposed to add. So we have a couple options here. We can rip back completely and start over, or we can add this extra stitch in pink and then go back later and do duplicate stitch over where we missed it. Personally, that's my poison of choice, because redoing color work is pretty exhausting, and duplicate stitch, most people don't notice the difference, so I'd say it's worth it to just continue as if we've done it right the whole time, go back later and duplicate stitch where we made a few mistakes. So part of a way that you'll know that you're getting this right is that you'll see these like really cute little floats along the edge here that like secure them two together. Honestly, I love how this turns out, and oh, I can see where I forgot the stitch right there. That's no biggie, that's like literally a 1 stitch difference. But as you can see, it kind of has like a dominance depending on the direction you're knitting. Like this pink is definitely dominant here and the gray is dominant on this side. But anyways, that's just a good way to test to see if you're doing it correctly. Okay, so now we are at the part of the heart where we need to start dividing it in the middle. So this is where we pull out this guy, and we can also consider either using stranded knitting for the center with the pink or keeping it pure Intarsia. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to keep it pure Intarsia, but for the first 1 or 2 rows, you could really just do stranded knitting over this spot since it's only 2 stitches for this first row. Now I'm going to make this into 2 little balls. So here's 1 and here's 2. So this is the one that's already connected. So we're going to leave that connected and we're going to start on our left. So push these bad boys out into work and knit. And now using the already connected piece, we are going to knit this section. Okay, and now we have the 2 gray bits for our third tiny ball of gray right here. I'm going to do these by hand. One, and then if you want like a little extra snug security, sometimes what I do is I actually knit with both the tail and this guy. But since we need to wind this in here later to keep this hole from forming, I'm gonna just leave it out like that. So, and 2. And now we take our other ball of pink and we're going to work this section of the heart. Oof. All right, and that is all our color work done. And since this is the gray yarn that's over on the right side, which is like our working side, we're just going to use this as our last 10 rows. So I'm going to change my carriage back into standard with both of the levers switched to N, and then we're just going to knit 10 rows. Now I'm going to cut all of our working yarn, making sure to leave a little bit of a tail to weave in, except for this one that's currently in use, because we're going to use that to bind off. And now we just bind off. Oh, yes. Here it is right off the machine. You can see immediately where I just totally biffed it right there, so I'm going to do duplicate stitch to fix that bad boy up. But otherwise, it's looking pretty good. You can also see a couple other problem areas. You probably notice this guy right here and this guy right here and this. Those are all where we started a new, like, working yarn. So from this side, you can see that this is where we started our pink to start off with, and this is where we started our gray, and this is where we started our other pink. So all we really need to do for that is make these nice and snug and then weave them in, and that way that little hole won't show up. See? Once you get it nice and snug, you won't be able to see it. I'll show you with the gray too, because that hole is a little bit more noticeable. Just kind of pull this nice and snug, and then kind of wrap it, seam it like right around and then up here. So I'm going to seam this up, fix my mistake by using duplicate stitch, and then I'm going to block it, and I'll show you guys what it looks like as a finished product. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you want any other tutorial videos like this, where I teach you different techniques on the knitting machine, also let me know. And go ahead and like and subscribe to see more videos like this and videos from me. And thank you so much. Have a good one.